Title: The Night the River Changed. They said the river was cursed, but none of us believed it until that night. I was there when it happened. I can still hear the sounds like whispers in the wind. I remember it as if it were yesterday, though it feels like a lifetime ago. The village had always been quiet, peaceful. Our homes lined the edge of the river, and every morning we'd see the water flowing calmly as it had for generations. We'd bathe in it, wash our clothes, and gather around it, listening to the stories of our elders. The river was part of us. It was a part of our life. But that night, the river was different. It started with a strange smell, like wet earth and something else, something foul. I was sitting outside near my grandmother's hut when I felt it. The air felt heavier, thicker. I looked around and everything seemed still. Even the birds had stopped singing. The only sound was the low murmur of the river. Then my uncle, who had been fishing at the riverbank, came running. His eyes were wide with fear. His voice shook as he called for the others. "Something is wrong with the river," he shouted. At first, we didn't take him seriously. The river had flooded before, but never like this. The elders used to tell us stories about the spirits of the river, about how they could be kind or angry, depending on how we treated the water. But this was something no one had seen before. We all rushed to the riverbank, and that's when we saw it. The water, normally clear and calm, was dark, swirling in strange patterns. It wasn't flowing as it should. It was churning, like something was moving beneath the surface. My grandmother, who knew all the old stories, stood silent for a moment. Her face went pale. "The river has changed," she whispered. "The spirit is angry." We stood there, frozen, as the water began to rise. Slowly at first, then faster. People started to panic, running back to their homes to gather what they could. But the water didn't stop. It crept higher and higher until it reached the huts by the riverbank. That's when the voices began. It started softly, like whispers in the wind, but then grew louder. We couldn't understand the words, but we could hear the pain in them. It was as if the river itself was crying out. My mother grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the hills, away from the water. But I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. Something about that sound, it pulled me in. That's when I saw it. From the river, a figure rose. A figure made of water, shimmering and twisting in the moonlight. It was tall, almost human, but not quite. Its body rippled like the river itself, its face blank, yet somehow full of sorrow. I wanted to run, but my feet felt stuck to the ground. And then the figure spoke. "Return what was taken," it said, its voice like the sound of rushing water. I didn't know what it meant, but my grandmother did. She had always told us stories about the greed of the village leaders long ago. How they took more than they needed from the river. How they polluted the water with their carelessness. The spirits will take back what belongs to them, she had warned us. That night, the river took more than just water. It took our peace. It took the homes of those who had ignored the balance. By morning, the water had receded, but it left behind a message. The riverbank was flooded, but it wasn't just the land that was changed. There was something different in the air, something that made us all more careful. We rebuilt, yes, but we rebuilt with respect for the river. We no longer took from it without giving back. From that day on, we treated the river as a living thing. And every year, when the rains came, we gathered by the water to honor the spirits of the river, to remind ourselves of the night it changed us all. The river was cursed, my grandmother used to say. But we learned that it wasn't the river itself that was cursed. It was our forgetting.